What's the most genius revenge you ever witnessed that didn't break a single law? Story 1. I worked in a small company where one of our coworkers, Daniel, constantly took credit for others' work. Every meeting, he'd somehow twist the narrative to make it seem like he had done the heavy lifting. Management loved him. We all hated him. One of my coworkers, Michelle, got hit especially hard. She spent weeks developing a client pitch, designing everything from scratch. The day of the meeting, Daniel swooped in, presented it, and left Michelle in the dust. She was furious but didn't show it. A month later, we were preparing for an even bigger pitch. Michelle again volunteered to help with the research, but this time, she played it smart. She intentionally filled the shared project folder with flawed data. Nothing outrageously wrong, just subtle errors in stats, misattributed quotes, and incorrectly formatted slides. Then she told Daniel she was too swamped and let him take the lead. He copied everything without question and strutted into the meeting like usual. Except this time, the clients asked questions, ones he couldn't answer. The slide with the quote from Elon Musk was actually a SpongeBob line. The budget section used figures from a completely different industry. The whole thing imploded. He was humiliated. He didn't get fired, but from then on, no one trusted him with presentations again. Michelle never got in trouble. After all, she never submitted the pitch, just did her part, and let Daniel fly solo. Genius revenge. 100% legal. Story 2. In college, my roommate's ex cheated on her and dumped her the day before finals. Total jerk move. He told her over text and then blocked her on everything. Instead of crying about it, she waited 2 months until his birthday. She knew he was obsessed with astrology, crystals, and all things cosmic energy. So she went onto his favorite astrology forums and groups, using a fake profile with a profile pic of a spiritual-looking woman. She started messaging him daily, feeding him vague cosmic readings like, "A karmic rebalancing is approaching. Avoid red energy or it will consume you." He fully bought into it. She'd send messages like, "Someone close to you hides a bitter truth. Trust the new but question the old." He started questioning everyone around him, his friends, his professors, even his mom. He became super paranoid and distant. Eventually, he deleted all social media and stopped showing up to group hangouts. Months later, he dropped out to realign spiritually. She never contacted him again. Never said a word to anyone about it until years later. She just smiled, said, "He believed in karma, so I gave him some." Story 3. There was this guy in our apartment building who kept parking his massive truck across 2 spaces every single day. Despite complaints and polite notes, he ignored everyone. The building management was useless. So my neighbor Greg decided to get creative. He printed a bunch of fake official flyers for a truck enthusiast photo contest. He taped them up all over the building, complete with a QR code that led to a bogus contest submission page. The flyer read, "Is your truck your pride and joy? Show it off! Winners get a feature in Truckers Monthly and a $100 gift card." The truck guy entered, sent in photos of his vehicle from multiple angles, proudly showing how it dominated the 2 spaces. He even added a little brag in the submission form about not sharing space with junk cars. Greg posted the photos, anonymously, on Reddit's r mildly infuriating, with a caption like, "This guy parks like this every day at our building." It blew up. 60K upvotes in 24 hours. Someone recognized the lot and tagged the landlord. Management suddenly found the backbone to issue warnings and fines. The guy had to start parking like a normal human. His truck never made it to a magazine, but it did go viral for all the wrong reasons. Story 4. At my last job, we had a VP who was notorious for dismissing junior employees' ideas, only to pitch them weeks later as his own during executive meetings. It was an open secret, but no one wanted to risk their job by calling him out. One day, an intern named Alice came up with a genuinely innovative idea involving a new data visualization technique. She shared it with her team lead, who shared it with the VP. Of course, 2 weeks later, the VP unveiled it in a boardroom as his latest breakthrough. Alice had anticipated this. Before submitting the idea to her team lead, she posted it anonymously on her personal blog with a timestamp titled, "Exploring Pattern-Based Data Visualization." No names, no specifics, just the idea in plain text. When the VP gave his big presentation, one of the senior executives, who happened to be a bit of a tech nerd, said, "Hey, I read something really similar on a blog recently." He pulled it up. Exact same method. Word for word in parts. The room went quiet. The VP stammered something about similar thinking and cross-pollination, but the damage was done. Alice got offered a full-time role. The VP? He didn't get fired, but his reputation for innovation took a massive hit. He started asking his assistant to fact-check everything before meetings. Story 5. My cousin's neighbor was a nightmare. Loud music, drunken parties on weekdays, and a habit of letting his dog crap in everyone's yard. But the guy was careful. Never technically broke any laws, noise levels just under the legal limit, dog mess always accidentally left behind. My cousin decided to play the long game. He bought a universal TV remote. Every night, around 11 p.m., he'd walk outside and start messing with the guy's living room TV through his window. Volume up, volume down. Random channel switches. Turned on Netflix, then switched it to static. Sometimes turned it off entirely. The guy was losing his mind. He replaced the TV. Still happened. Switched the remote. Still happened. Called an electrician. Nothing wrong. Eventually, he was convinced the place was haunted. One night, after the volume blasted to max 3 times in a row, he just stood outside yelling into the sky, "I get it! I'll move!" And he did. A month later, he broke his lease and left. My cousin never said a word. Still has that remote. Still laughs about it. Story 6. My high school economics teacher had a strange vendetta against a student named Jordan. No matter what Jordan did, raise his hand, complete assignments early, even volunteer, he got shut down, marked off, or ignored. It was weird, borderline personal. Jordan was a quiet kid, but smart. For the final project, we had to form groups and present business proposals. Jordan requested to work alone, which was allowed. He turned in a half-assed proposal, a lemonade stand with projected profits of $7 a week. The teacher mocked him in front of everyone, gave him a C. Here's where it gets good. Jordan took his idea, yes, the exact same bad lemonade stand, and actually set one up across the street from the school, where parking was hell, and parents always waited for their kids. But instead of lemonade, he sold bottled cold drinks and snacks. Dirt cheap, all cash. Within weeks, he made hundreds. He printed out flyers with his earnings and left one on the teacher's desk each Friday for the rest of the year. Always signed, "Your C student." Never said a word in class, never gloated, just dropped the flyer and walked out. Story 7. My sister once lived in an apartment where her upstairs neighbor was a heel-wearing, all-night stomping maniac. Every complaint was met with fake apologies, followed by even louder pacing. Felt intentional. Rather than engage, my sister downloaded a subwoofer app, hooked it to her speakers, and every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, she'd play a looping audio track of a marble rolling across a hardwood floor and the sound of a faint, dripping tap. Barely audible, but just enough to make someone think they were losing it. Then she bought a cheap wireless doorbell and stuck the button under her floorboards. Randomly, she'd press it from her room, and the chime would echo upstairs. A week later, the neighbor started knocking on her door asking if she heard weird sounds. She played dumb. Within a month, the stomping stopped completely. 3 months later, the neighbor broke her lease and moved. Story 8. At my old job, there was a team lead named Ken, who was a chronic mansplainer. He'd cut off women mid-sentence, re-explain what they just said, and claim their ideas were too ambitious or not viable. He'd never listen to feedback unless it came from another guy. One coworker, Janine, had enough. She created a new Slack alias under a male name, J. Morrison, same initials. She used it to message Ken ideas, proposals, and project suggestions, ones she had already made before but were rejected. Suddenly, Ken loved them. He'd forward Jay's messages to the team with praise like, "Let's execute this!" Or Jay's really sharp. A month in, Janine gathered every Slack message and email and presented it in a meeting titled Internal Bias in Team Communication. She showed side-by-sides of Ken rejecting her suggestions, then accepting them from Jay. She never raised her voice, just showed the facts. The silence in the room was heavy. Ken didn't get fired, but he sure got demoted. Janine got promoted 2 months later. Story 9. There was a local coffee shop I used to frequent. A chain store moved in across the street. Sleek branding, loud music, overpriced drinks. They started poaching the small cafe's baristas by offering bonuses, then spread rumors about food safety violations to push customers away. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Clarice, never lashed out. She just made one tiny change. She started offering free coffee to anyone who brought in a receipt from the chain. 1 cup per day, no questions asked. It became a quiet movement. People would buy the cheapest drink from the chain and walk right over to her place for the free good stuff. Foot traffic doubled. She gained new regulars who then started buying food, pastries, merch. 3 months in, the chain started hemorrhaging. They pulled their loyalty program. Then, their staff shrank. Finally, they shut down. Clarice printed one of their store closing signs, framed it, and hung it behind her counter with a sticker that said, "Karma Blend." Story 10. Back in college, our dorm RA was a stickler, borderline power tripping. She'd fine people $25 for leaving trash out, $50 for noise violations, and once tried to write up someone for microwaving bacon. She played favorites, too. Never fined her friends, only the people she didn't like. One guy on our floor, Eric, got fined 7 times in one semester. But he never argued. Instead, he started a side hustle. He launched a fake dorm compliance consulting service. It was just a joke at first. He posted flyers around the hall. Tired of fines? Hire Eric. $10 flat fee. Guaranteed peace. People started paying him, not for actual advice, just so he'd walk into their rooms and loudly say things like, "Ah, yes. Placing your trash bin 2 feet from the door definitely meets dorm code 7.4. Word spread. It became a meme. The RA got so annoyed with the attention and started trying to get him in trouble. But he never broke any rules. He just walked into rooms and made up nonsense codes. Eventually, the RA got reported for favoritism and was moved to another building. Eric kept his consulting going for the rest of the year. His tagline? "I don't stop fines. I make them embarrassed to write one." Story 11. I used to work at a tech company where this guy named Brandon would hog all the whiteboard space in the shared brainstorming room. He'd scribble his startup ideas, crypto predictions, or diagrams from online courses. Then label the board, "Do not erase important." No one else could use it, and management didn't want to stir drama. So it sat covered in Brandon's genius for weeks. Enter Marta, one of our junior devs. She started coming in every morning and adding small, accurate corrections to Brandon's diagrams. Not enough to erase anything. Just tweaks, like adjusting formulas or pointing out logic errors in the margins, in red marker. Then she'd sign it, "Editor?" Eventually, others joined in. Someone added citations. Another person formatted it like a published paper. It became a collaborative masterpiece of passive-aggressive academic vandalism. Brandon stopped updating it. A few weeks later, he quietly stopped using the room entirely. He never complained. But every time someone new joined the team, we'd point at the board and say, "That's the community research project." Story 12. My uncle owns a small hardware store in a town where a big box chain opened up across the street and started undercutting him. The chain would even send employees into his store to check prices and adjust theirs in real time. So my uncle got creative. He started pricing common items weirdly. 99 cents for a hammer, $3.72 for duct tape, $4.11 for nails. The chain store copied it all blindly. Then, once a week, he'd swap the shelf tags around just before closing. The duct tape would now cost $17.99, nails 25 cents, hammer $29.49. He'd leave it up for 1 hour, just enough for the chain to send in their price spies and update accordingly. They adjusted their signs without double-checking. Customers flocked back to my uncle's store for normal prices. After 2 months of this, corporate sent someone to investigate. My uncle said, "I just run my store. If they want to copy me without thinking, that's their business." He didn't break a single rule. Eventually, the chain stopped price matching. They couldn't keep up with the chaos. Story 13. During my freshman year, there was a guy in our dorm who loved stealing food. Not just random stuff. He specifically stole the expensive things like fancy cheeses, meal-prepped steaks, anything labeled or locked in a shared fridge. One of my roommates, Kyle, had enough. He cooked a perfect-looking ribeye steak, seasoned and seared, then injected it with mashed-up ghost peppers and wasabi. He let it sit in the fridge in a fancy container with a post-it, "Do not touch birthday dinner." Sure enough, next morning it was gone. That night we heard someone puking violently in the shared bathroom, like animalistic screeching levels of pain. The thief never confessed, but the food stealing stopped entirely. Kyle never said a word, just walked around smiling, humming every time someone opened the fridge. Story 14. A coworker of mine, Dana, had this rival in the office named Ron. Ron would constantly brag about how connected he was and how he could get anything done with a few phone calls. Worse, he would constantly interrupt others' conversations with name-dropping and one-upping. So Dana decided to make him the star of a little prank. She created a fake LinkedIn profile for a recruiter named Lindsay Delacroix from a made-up tech company called Infinity Core Labs. Dana even had AI-generated headshots and a whole website using a free template. Lindsay messaged Ron saying she'd heard about his talents and wanted to interview him for a 6-figure remote job. He took the bait, bragged to the entire office, took a day off for the interview. Dana, using voice-altering software, conducted the call. She fed him ridiculous fake questions like, "How do you optimize the blockchain of a non-cloud physical server?" He bluffed through all of them. She ended the call by saying, "We'll be in touch." A week later, Dana sent him a "regret to inform you" email. Politely worded, but with a jab. "We're seeking candidates with stronger fundamentals and less reliance on buzzwords." He was humiliated, never name-dropped again. Story 15. I worked in a bookstore during college, and one of our regulars was a guy who'd come in, flip through books for hours, then leave a mess behind. He'd pile them in random spots, dog-ear pages, even spill coffee on the covers. When asked to be careful, he'd say, "I'm browsing. That's what bookstores are for." Our manager couldn't ban him, but our coworker Ray came up with a brilliant plan. She made a staff pick display called "For the True Connoisseur" and filled it with the driest, most obscure, footnote-heavy academic texts she could find. Things like Sanskrit lexicons of the pre-Vedic era and Advanced Fungus Taxonomy, Volume 7. She added little tags. "You might enjoy this," and placed it right where the guy liked to sit. Predictably, he took the bait, started reading them, loudly commenting on how deep and nuanced the writing was. Other customers gave him weird looks. Some even giggled. After 2 weeks, he stopped showing up altogether. Ray just shrugged. I gave him what he wanted, real intellectual stimulation. Story 16. My cousin is a wedding planner. She once worked with a bride who was so rude it was comical. Screamed at staff, insulted vendors, and even mocked the florist's accent. But she was careful not to break any contracts. Just pure nastiness with a smile. After one especially cruel rant directed at the baker, my cousin had enough. She didn't cancel anything or sabotage the wedding. Instead, she sent the bride a questionnaire for media release purposes. It asked things like, what song would best describe your relationship? What was your worst fight? And what do you hope people say about you after the wedding? The bride eagerly filled it out, thinking she'd be featured in some bridal magazine. She wrote Savage by Megan Thee Stallion as her couple anthem, detailed a massive fight involving a prenup, and said, people will say I was the hottest one there, obviously. At the wedding, instead of printed programs, my cousin made cute little couple fun fax cards and placed them on every table. Direct quotes from the form. Guests were howling. The bride never realized who leaked it, but she fired my cousin the next morning, after everything was over and fully paid. Sweet, legal, poetic. Story 17. When I was in middle school, there was a popular kid named Trevor who used to mock this quiet kid, Lucas, every day during lunch. Nothing violent, just relentless teasing. Lucas never reacted, but he was always watching. One day, Trevor started running for class president. Made a big deal of it. Posters, stickers, even custom buttons. He promised vending machines and longer lunch. Total clown campaign. But people were eating it up. Lucas quietly submitted his own candidacy with no fanfare. Instead of speeches, he posted flyers showing side-by-side screenshots of Trevor's public Instagram stories where he mocked other students, including a clip where he faked a stutter while imitating a teacher. The rules didn't forbid using real student content in campaigns. Lucas didn't say a word, just posted receipts. The vote, Lucas won by a landslide. Trevor tried to complain to the principal, but Lucas had followed every rule. His campaign, 100% facts, no insults, just Trevor's own words on display. Trevor never bullied anyone again. Lucas served his term quietly, with vending machines. Story 18. My neighbor had a feud with another guy down the street over a tree branch. A branch. It barely hung over the other guy's yard. Still, he called code enforcement 5 times in a month. The city came out, said it was legal. But the guy kept pestering, sending letters, taking photos. He was obsessed. So my neighbor decided to play the long game. He started putting decorative items on that specific branch. Bird feeders shaped like tiny disco balls, holiday ornaments out of season, a motion-activated gnome that laughed. All tacky, but completely on his side of the property line. Then he upped the game. He bought a Bluetooth speaker, disguised as a rock, and placed it under the tree. Every morning at 8:15 a.m. it played, Don't Worry, Be Happy, just loud enough to be heard from next door. The guy eventually installed blackout curtains and trimmed his side of the tree into a weird bowl shape, but he stopped complaining. Passive resistance, Nature Edition. Story 19. In my first office job, there was a guy named Phil who always microwaved fish. Not just once. It was daily. And it wasn't tuna. It was something worse. Wet, steamy, fermented sock-scented. Everyone complained, begged, even put up signs. Phil didn't care. Said it was his right to eat what he wanted. Then someone, we never found out who, started a campaign called The Fish Diaries. They'd print short, poetic reviews and anonymously tape them above the microwave. Stuff like, Day 14, a wave of sorrow crests over Tilapia Town. A single tear falls into the Tupperware. Or, Day 22, the mackerel returns, stronger, slimmier. The break room air forever changed. It became legendary. People started adding their own entries. Someone created a Twitter account and posted them daily. The HR manager even read one aloud during a staff meeting. Phil got so embarrassed he stopped bringing fish entirely. Still, to this day, our office Slack has a #Fish Diaries channel. Completely legal, absolutely iconic. Story 20. My best friend dated a guy who ghosted her after she loaned him $500 for rent. He stopped responding to texts, deleted her on everything, and vanished. She was heartbroken, But more than that, furious. Rather than chase him down or go legal, she waited 2 months. Then, she made a Tinder profile using fake photos of an attractive woman and the exact kind of profile that Guy couldn't resist. Adventurous dog lover into crypto. She matched with him instantly. For the next 3 weeks, she flirted with him using this alter ego, got him to open up, talk about his goals, dreams, and finally, what happened with his last ex. He admitted he borrowed money and ghosted her, but said she was too clingy. Then she set up a date, told him to meet her at a fancy rooftop bar, dressed formally. Even reserved a table under the fake name. He showed up, alone, waited and waited. Meanwhile, she was a block away, watching from her car, eating takeout and blasting the playlist he made her before ghosting. He stayed for an hour before realizing. She never said a word, just got her revenge in silence. Story 21. My coworker Amelia once had a boss who constantly scheduled urgent Zoom meetings at 5:59 p.m. We were a remote team, and the workday technically ended at 6 p.m. But he'd always do this power move where he'd drop a last-minute invite and act surprised when people didn't join. Amelia never said anything until she quietly learned how to schedule Zoom bots. For 2 straight weeks, she had a bot programmed to auto-join any meeting from him after 5:55 p.m. It would sit silently, camera off, mic muted, but present. Meanwhile, she'd be cooking dinner or doing yoga. The kicker? She named the bot after herself, used a still image of her smiling, and even added a chat message. Sorry, poor connection, still here. He got increasingly frustrated. Kept saying, Amelia, can you hear me? And then eventually just ended the calls. After 3 weeks of being ignored by someone who was technically present, he stopped scheduling late meetings entirely. Not a rule broken in sight. Story 22. There was a guy in our neighborhood who had a massive Christmas display. 12-foot inflatables, strobe lights, synchronized music. Cool at first, but he kept it running until 3 a.m. every night for 2 months straight. After complaints failed, my neighbor Hal took action. He didn't cut power or file noise reports. He bought a projector. Every night, he aimed it directly at the guy's garage door and played silent black and white horror movies. Nosferatu, Carnival of Souls, and old zombie flicks, all in grainy loop. The glowing Santa was now backdropped by Dracula looming over him. It was hilarious and creepy. People started coming by to watch the weird combo. Cheerful music with ghastly shadows playing behind it. Eventually, the guy took down the display after a teenager called it the Cursed Christmas House. Hal just smiled and said, Holiday spirit comes in all forms. Story 23. Back in high school, there was this senior named Beth who always interrupted group projects to take over. She'd talk over everyone, assign herself the easiest part, then credit herself for all the work. For the final history project, my friend Maya decided to let Beth shine, all on her own. She suggested that Beth be the face of the presentation and take care of everything. Maya and the others pretended to be bad at research, confused about the topic, and so glad Beth could lead. Beth gladly took over. Wrote the whole thing herself, created the slides, rehearsed alone. What she didn't know was that the group secretly chose a different topic, got it approved by the teacher, and prepared their real presentation separately. So on presentation day, when Beth confidently walked up and started talking about ancient Mesopotamia, the title slide behind her said, The French Revolution, a bloody turning point. She stood there frozen. The teacher was in on it too. He gave her a separate grade. She got a C. The group got an A. Beth stopped volunteering after that. Story 24? At my old job, there was a guy named Tony who used a Bluetooth speaker in the office. He'd blast his music during lunch. EDM, trap remixes, and sometimes sound effects. We asked him to use headphones, but he insisted, it's not that loud. So our intern Sam got even. Sam downloaded the exact same Bluetooth speaker model on his phone. One day while Tony was blasting music, Sam paired with the speaker and began randomly switching the audio, from club beats to Gregorian chants, then to whale noises, then to a podcast about ASMR chewing. Tony was confused. Switched devices. It happened again. Eventually, Sam started playing motivational speeches with titles like How to Be Considerate in Shared Spaces and Your Ego Isn't a Personality. Tony thought the speaker was broken and tossed it a week later. Sam just whistled softly every time a new intern asked about bringing a speaker. Story 25. My roommate Emma had a neighbor who always borrowed things without asking. Umbrellas, chargers, even once took our doormat for just a few days. When confronted, she always said, Oh, I thought we were sharing. Emma didn't yell. She printed labels. One by one, she began labeling all our items with huge QR codes. Not her name, just QR codes. When scanned, each code linked to a website she built called Things You Didn't Ask to Borrow, with time-stamped photos of the item being used without permission and passive-aggressive captions like, January 2nd, our umbrella finds new life at the farmer's market. She also labeled her lunch in the fridge with QR stickers. The neighbor took a bite, scanned it, and found a photo of herself caught on the kitchen cam mid-theft. We never heard from her again, and Emma started selling custom QR label kits online. Story 26. There was a guy in my college dorm who always unplugged people's consoles in the common room when he wanted to watch sports. No warning, no asking, just walked in and yanked the cord mid-game. His reasoning? Major events come first. Everyone hated it. But the RAs didn't want to get involved. Then one student named Devin got clever. He bought a universal remote with macro programming, then mapped it to the dorm's smart TV and soundbar. Whenever the sports guy started watching, Devin waited for the perfect moment. A tense pitch, a game-winning free throw, and muted everything, blacked out the screen, or turned on subtitles in Korean. The guy got so paranoid, he reset the TV. Still happened. He asked tech support. Still happened. Finally, he just started watching games on his laptop with headphones, glaring at the screen like it had betrayed him. Nobody ever saw Devin do it, but everyone silently high-fived him. Story 27. My aunt is a librarian at a quiet suburban library where one guy used to loudly FaceTime people every afternoon. He'd sit in the reading area, speakers on full blast, discussing everything from fantasy football to bowel movements. Signs were ignored. Requests were laughed off. One time he told an old lady, "Get a hearing aid if it bothers you." So my aunt printed out fake new library policies and posted them discreetly near his favorite table. Among them was this line. Section 5B. Visitors engaging in video calls may be subject to live transcription and archiving for future library records and AI training datasets. He read it, turned pale, and walked out mid-call. He never came back. When others asked about the transcription policy, my aunt just smiled and said, "Oh, that's only relevant for people with notable behavior." Story 28. At our office, there was this woman named Clara who always microwaved leftover shrimp every day, and not just normal portions, full containers. You could smell it in the stairwell. People complained, but she said, "It's cultural. If you speak up, it's discrimination." So HR backed off. Until my friend Nico decided to play it smart. He started bringing in his own cultural dish, fermented durian, but he didn't eat it. He just microwaved it, let it sit for a minute, then tossed it. The smell was otherworldly. Clara stormed into HR the third day, demanding they do something, but Nico had a printed label on his container. Family recipe, please respect food diversity. HR had to admit there were no rules against it. Clara stopped bringing shrimp by the end of the week. Story 29. In high school, there was a rich kid named Tyler who never studied, but always got top grades. Turns out, his dad was a donor, and he had a shady deal with one of the teachers who reviewed his tests before grading. One day, he got cocky and told another student, "Even if I turn in a blank page, I'll still pass." Wrong person to brag to? That student Kelly hatched a plan. For the next quiz, she switched her name with Tyler's on the Scantron. Same seat order, same handwriting. Easy to mimic, since he rarely wrote much anyway. She turned in his perfect test. He turned in hers, which was intentionally blank. The teacher gave Tyler a 100%, like always. Kelly took a photo of both score sheets, hers and the real Tyler's. She posted it anonymously online with context. It exploded. The school launched an internal investigation. Tyler was dropped from the honor roll. The teacher retired early. And the principal quietly reshuffled the grading policy. Kelly never took credit. She just smiled whenever someone asked what happened. Story 30. My neighbor has a beautiful front yard. Flowers, hedges, bird feeders, everything manicured. Then one summer, a dog owner started letting her massive Great Dane use it as a toilet. Every single morning. My neighbor tried signs, fences, lights, nothing worked. So he installed a camera and set up a motion sensor, not to scare the dog, but to trigger a lawn sprinkler immediately after the dog finished its business. Every time, the lady would barely get the leash untangled before they were both soaked. After a week of this, she marched up to his porch, furious. He pointed to the sign he added under his doorbell camera. "Sprinkler runs on schedule, courtesy of the lawn gods." She never came back. Story 31. My older sister had a co-worker who would borrow her snacks from the office fridge. Not once or twice, daily. She'd label everything, even write notes like, "Please don't take this, I'm diabetic," and he'd still do it. Management said unless she caught him red-handed, nothing could be done. So one day, she filled a container with chocolate pudding, mixed with a full teaspoon of Miralax. Not illegal, just laxative-laced dessert. She wrote a note that said, "Eating this may result in urgent consequences." Sure enough, the container was gone by noon. That afternoon, the guy disappeared mid-meeting and wasn't seen for the rest of the day. The next day, he sent a company-wide email asking for more respect in shared spaces and mysteriously never took food again. Her snack stayed untouched for the rest of the year. Story 32. There was a girl in our college class who always asked the most obnoxious questions in lectures, not to learn, but to brag. She'd interrupt with phrases like, "When I was interning at Tesla," or "This reminds me of when I traveled to Morocco on a research grant." One guy, Ethan, had enough. He made a bingo sheet of all her favorite flexes. Squares included Tesla internship, fluent in 3 languages, father's private jet. While I was in Geneva, he started passing out the sheets before class, quietly. No names. People started giggling every time she opened her mouth. Eventually, she caught on. One day she raised her hand, said, "So when I was touring CERN," and the room erupted in laughter. Someone actually shouted, "Bingo!" She stopped raising her hand after that. Story 33. My best friend had a boss who refused to approve her vacation time, no matter how early she asked. He'd accidentally forget or stall until flights became too expensive to book. So she found out when he was going on vacation, 2 weeks in Hawaii, and started submitting urgent internal requests the day he left. Emails like, "Need quick sign-off from you on this Q4 pricing draft." He had to respond from the beach every day. When he came back, he asked her if it was necessary. She said, "Well, since you never seem to approve my time off, I just assumed we were on a no-break policy." He approved her next vacation request in 5 minutes. Story 34. We had a guy in our apartment building who loved revving his motorcycle at 6 a.m. every weekend. Complaints? Ignored. He said, "It's legal, you're just sensitive." Then came Janine. She bought a white noise machine, a megaphone, and a baby monitor. She recorded his revving sounds and made a loop out of it, then played it back at 3:30 a.m. right outside his door. She did this twice a week for a month. Always just long enough to wake him up, then stop. He left a note that said, "Cut the crap." She replied, "It's legal. You're just sensitive." He stopped revving. Nobody else had to say a word. Story 35. My uncle worked at a construction site where a new guy constantly stole tools. Subtle things like tape measures, drills, gloves. Never outright theft. Just accidentally walked off with things and never brought them back. So one day the crew made a special tool just for him. They hollowed out the casing of a cordless drill and installed a battery pack filled with glitter, glue, and powdered chalk, rigged so when the trigger was pulled too hard, it would explode, non-dangerously, into a puff of shame. The guy stole it within the hour. That afternoon, he pulled the trigger. Boom! Bright pink glitter, sticky glue, and a chalk cloud that made him look like a pink raccoon. His hands were stained for 2 days. He never took a thing again. Story 36. I worked at a boutique marketing firm where the founder's daughter, Sabrina, got hired straight out of high school. She had 0 experience, skipped training, and was given a creative director title. Her job? Micromanaging people who were 10 times more qualified. She'd reject good pitches, rewrite ad copy using ChatGPT, and criticize designs by saying they weren't vibey enough. When she got pushback, she'd cry to her dad, and people would get demoted or reassigned. One designer, Leo, had enough. Instead of quitting, he pitched a major campaign for a luxury skincare client and asked Sabrina for final creative direction, knowing she'd rewrite it. She took over, changed all the elegant taglines to phrases like "glow hard" or "go home" and "skin so good it hurts." Leo made no objections. The client approved the drafts online without seeing the visuals. Everything moved fast. Launch day arrived. Digital ads, print posters, even influencer kits went out. It was exactly what she wrote. The backlash was nuclear. Twitter lit up with people clowning the slogans. A popular skincare blogger made a viral video titled, "When Nepotism Meets Bad Moisturizer." Sabrina tried to deflect, but Leo had kept receipts, emails, timestamps, her edits. The client demanded an apology and threatened to leave. Her dad quietly transitioned her out the next week. Leo got promoted. All Leo ever said was, "I just gave her creative control." Story 37. My neighbor Henry had a long-standing issue with the guy across the street who threw weekend pool parties. Every weekend, no matter the season. Loud music, drunk yelling, sometimes even fireworks. Police were called multiple times, but the guy always claimed it was under noise ordinance limits and blamed random guests. Henry didn't retaliate with noise. Instead, he got a city landscaping permit and spent 6 weeks building a massive 8-foot-tall privacy hedge along the entire edge of his property facing the party house. It wasn't just a bush, it was a wall. But here's the kicker. On the hedge facing their side, he attached over 50 motion sensor mirrors angled to reflect their own lights and chaos right back at them. Every time they partied, their floodlights bounced off the mirrors, flashing straight into their own windows. Their music echoed back at them. It looked like a disco ball from hell. The guy came over and asked Henry to tone it down. Henry smiled and said, "I'm just enjoying my greenery. They haven't thrown a party in 3 months." Story 38. I once worked with a guy named Darren who had a superiority complex and an ego that didn't fit through the door. He always interrupted others during presentations, stole credit, and dismissed ideas by muttering, "We've already tried that. Won't work." One coworker, Elise, started tracking every time he said that. For 6 months, she kept a spreadsheet of his dismissals. Topic, context, exact phrasing, and most importantly, the outcomes. Many of the ideas he shut down ended up being quietly implemented by other teams or departments and succeeded. Then came quarterly review time. Elise asked to do a presentation titled Lessons from Internal Innovation. Leadership loved the idea. She walked them through real examples of dismissed ideas that had succeeded elsewhere. Then she revealed the spreadsheet. 37 ideas Darren had dismissed, 24 implemented by others, 22 with measurable positive results. She never named him directly. She didn't have to. Everyone recognized the quotes. Darren's face turned a new shade of red every few minutes. After that, he stopped talking in meetings. Elise got invited to a cross-departmental strategy group. Story 39. A girl in my apartment complex used to let her boyfriend park in the spot I paid for, constantly. I'd come home after work and find his beat-up truck sitting there. I left notes. I complained to the manager. She said he was just visiting and refused to stop. So I signed up for a tow company's on-call service, gave them permission to tow any unauthorized car in my spot 24/7. All legal, all documented. Next time I saw his truck, I called it in. Tow guy came within 10 minutes, hauled it away while the girl watched from her window, horrified. She ran outside screaming, but it was too late. But I wasn't done. I printed out the invoice from the tow company, framed it, and hung it on my door with the caption, "Reserved means reserved." She never parked there again, and she moved out 2 months later. Story 40. In our university's computer lab, there was this one guy who'd hog all the good monitors and unplug people mid-project if he needed a faster machine. No apology, no warning, just walked up and said, "My work is more important." So a group of CS majors got together and decided to target only him. They created a fake website called Grad Help Hub, filled with extremely convincing but completely bogus scholarship and internship listings for computer science students. They got him to bite. He spent days crafting applications, essays, and resumes for programs that didn't exist. Some of the links would lead to error messages. Others redirected him to Rick Astley videos or long-form articles about empathy and workplace etiquette. He got so frustrated, he complained to the IT department that someone was sabotaging him online. They found no evidence, because technically no one hacked him. He just clicked the wrong links. After that, he started asking before unplugging anything. And he started using the slow computers in the corner, voluntarily. Story 41. My friend Kate worked in an office where a guy named Jordan would manspread during team meetings. But this wasn't just legroom. He'd take up multiple chairs, toss his bag on the conference table, and talk over every female colleague. Once he interrupted Kate during a product demo and said, "I'll just finish this. You're clearly nervous." That was the last straw. Kate waited. She didn't confront him directly. Instead, she spent the next week secretly gathering office chairs, 2 at a time, and hiding them in the storage closet. By Monday morning, the meeting room had only 2 chairs left. Jordan walked in, confused, sat awkwardly with his knees pressed together, while everyone else either stood or leaned casually. When he asked where the chairs went, Kate smiled and said, "We had to remove the ones not being used efficiently." The message landed. Chairs returned the following week. Jordan's ego didn't. Story 42. A guy in my freshman dorm loved to host poker nights, but never cleaned up after. Crumbs, wrappers, pizza boxes. He'd leave them all in the shared study room and say, "It's college, relax." So a group of us got creative. We found a local magician in training who did birthday parties and hired him for $40 to show up during the guy's next game, dressed in full tuxedo. He stormed in shouting, "Who summoned me?" Then he started doing tricks, pulling cards from behind ears, shuffling decks mid-hand, and loudly narrating every move like it was the finals in Vegas. The game disbanded within minutes. The magician stayed and performed for the rest of us, eating leftover pizza. The guy never hosted again. We still send that magician a holiday card every year. Story 43. At my old apartment complex, there was a woman who constantly stole Amazon packages. She'd deny it, but security footage would always show her accidentally picking up the wrong box, then forgetting to return it. One of my neighbors, Ron, had had enough, so he ordered a fake package, a shoebox filled with dyed mouse bedding, glitter, and a note that said, "Smile! You're on camera, Susan!" He left it right outside his door. By afternoon, it was gone. 3 hours later, we saw Susan on the security camera frantically running to the dumpster, covered in purple fluff and glitter. That same day, management posted a new rule. Package theft would result in lease termination. Susan moved out 2 weeks later. Ron's next package was real and came with a thank you note from half the building. Story 44. My cousin dated a guy who cheated on her, lied about it, and then gaslit her into thinking she was the problem. When she finally broke it off, he told her no one else would ever handle his lifestyle. So she didn't scream, didn't block him. She simply made him irrelevant. Over the next 3 months, she became best friends with his mother. They joined the same gym, volunteered at the same animal shelter. His mom adored her and started inviting her to family dinners without telling her son. One day, he came home to find my cousin helping decorate the house for his sister's baby shower. He flipped. His mom said calmly, "If you treat people better, you wouldn't be so surprised." He stormed out. My cousin stayed for cake. Story 45. There was a guy in my workplace, Max, who would always show up 5 minutes late to meetings but complain if anyone else was late. He once made an intern cry by scolding her in front of the entire room for being unprofessional. So our team decided to make time his enemy. For 2 weeks, we adjusted every meeting invite by 5 minutes, forward or back, without telling Max. He'd show up thinking he was early and find us already wrapping up, or he'd come racing in, out of breath, only to find out the meeting wasn't for another 10 minutes. He got increasingly paranoid, started double-checking everything, even accused the calendar system of glitching. At the end of the quarter, someone gave him a gag gift, a desktop flip clock with a post-it note. Be present, not punctual. He took a vacation after that. Meetings have never been calmer. Back in high school, our debate team had a golden boy named Bryce. He was smart, but he cheated. He'd steal opening statements from obscure forums and pass them off as original work. No one could prove it, though. Then along came Nina, a quiet sophomore who kept getting beat by Bryce in competitions. Instead of accusing him outright, she began seeding the forums with fake sample arguments, brilliant sounding but flawed logic that would fall apart under pressure. She'd post them under usernames like DebateChamp92 or Ivy Prep Kid. Sure enough, Bryce began lifting entire passages from her bait. At the next major tournament, he collapsed during rebuttal when the judges challenged his logic. He froze, then fumbled, then sat down. Nina didn't win the competition, but she placed higher than Bryce for the first time ever. A few weeks later, he mysteriously dropped out of the team. She never bragged, but we all knew. She didn't beat him with words. She beat him with traps. Story 47. My neighbor used to have this habit of using everyone's trash bins on pickup day. He'd dump his overflow, bags, boxes, old food into whatever bin had room. No permission, no care. The final straw was when he stuffed 3 leaking garbage bags into my elderly aunt's recycling bin. The smell was unbearable. So I built a fake lid. I took her bin, inserted a thin false bottom halfway down, and glued in empty bottles and paper scraps above it to make it look full. Underneath, I placed a Bluetooth speaker and set up a motion-activated camera. That Monday, he popped open the bin and began stuffing trash, when the speaker blared a high-pitched scream followed by, "Put that trash back, you know who you are!" He freaked out, fell backwards into his own bin, and sprinted off. The footage went viral in our neighborhood group. He's never touched anyone else's bin since. Story 48. I worked in a bookstore with a coworker who constantly guilt-tripped everyone into covering her shifts. She'd cry, say her grandma was dying for the 4th time, or claim she was mentally exhausted. Then she'd post party pics hours later. HR wouldn't step in because she technically found coverage each time. So one weekend, we all agreed on a plan. She asked to swap her Friday evening shift. Everyone said yes, enthusiastically. But on Friday, no one showed up, not one single person. She came back Monday to find she was written up for a no-call, no-show. She tried to argue she had confirmed coverage, but everyone denied it. She got 2 more strikes that month. Same pattern, same treatment. No coverage. She was gone before the next schedule even came out. We call it the silent strike. Story 49. My ex-roommate, Caleb, loved playing guitar, which was fine, except he'd play the same 4 chords from the same 3 songs for hours every day. Out of tune, out of rhythm, over and over again. We asked him to use headphones. He laughed and said, "You can't silence passion." So we didn't. Instead, we embraced it. One day, my other roommate downloaded an audio editing app and began remixing Caleb's awful strumming into trap beats. Then we'd blast the edited version at 7 a.m. every morning. We titled it Guitar Crimes Vol. 1. Our friends loved it. We uploaded it to SoundCloud. Caleb was mortified when someone recognized it at a party. After a week, he stopped playing entirely, said he wasn't feeling the vibe anymore. Story 50. At my old university, there was a professor who'd grade based on whether he liked your tone. If you asked a question that sounded too confident, you'd get marked lower for attitude. He never wrote it, but everyone knew. One student, Aaron, decided to test him. For a research paper, Aaron cited only sources that used extreme passive voice and overly deferential language. Phrases like, "One could perhaps argue that, and while not worthy of certainty, it is mildly conceivable." The kicker? The paper was about aggressive leadership tactics. It was a masterpiece of contradiction. The professor gave it an A, with a note, "Much improved tone. Keep this style." Aaron framed that comment and brought it to every future lecture, then started a blog where he rewrote famous speeches, Gettysburg, MLK, etc., in passive voice. He called it, "I suppose we might have a dream?" The professor never questioned his tone again.